Welcome to our FEI Long Island chapter panel event covering strategic planning and innovative approaches. FEI is an organization of 11,000 plus members dedicated to helping CFOs, controllers, and other financial executives. FEI provides many benefits to its members, including world-class events, influence at the policy level of both of the SEC, PCAOB, and the FASB, providing electronically available research and emerging and current issues, providing online education and CPE events, publishing award-winning financial executives magazine, career center, and a discount program. The FEI Long Island chapter has hosts three events monthly. The first is a large educational events or panel events like this one. The next such event that we will have is Wednesday, April 22nd, which is our education night at Fox Hollow. You can all make it. The second event is a CFO roundtable. It's usually the second Tuesday of each month. The next one will be on March 10th. These are held at Neil's office at Eagle's Fensterman in Lake Success. This roundtable is limited to fellow financial executives only. It's a no pitches, no presentations, just your peers type of event. The advice you get in this setting is fundamentally different from the other types of events that we hold. It's unbiased and it reflects the experience of a seasoned set of CFOs and corporate counsel. Examples of some of the success stories that we've had as a result of these roundtables. We have one member who actually was helped in selling his company and negotiating a CFO's position for himself after the acquisition was completed. Another member received an idea that led to key financing after being turned down by over 20 other sources. And several members have received help with challenging personnel issues. Those are just a couple of the success stories, but each month somebody gains some value from that dynamic environment. The cost in terms of annual dues of all of this is between 1 and 3 hours of what you would pay for professional time. So in our view, it's an excellent value. So again, I can't say enough about the roundtables. For those of you whose members who have not participated, I'd urge you to come and try it out. March 10th is our next one. The third event is a CFO Roundtable for Public Companies, which is hosted by BDO. The next such event will be on February 24th. That's next Tuesday at BDO's office in the Sabaro building. The topic will be a proxy update, what you need to know for 2015. I'd like to thank our sponsors, BDO, Robert Half, Abrams Fensterman, Red 3 Consulting, Trintech, and Paychecks. Right now, I'd like to turn this over to our moderator, Andrea Rieger, of course, one of our members, and we really thank you for hosting the event for us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Variety Child Learning Center here. I'm glad that everybody came this morning. I was going to do an introduction of Nancy Engelhardt and Sue Fredericks, and then they looked at me and said, well, we have all of that written down already. We're handing that out. So I'm not going to do a long introduction. I can only tell you that I have had the experience of being several seminars through United Way with both these wonderful women. And they are terrific, dynamic, very smart, and have helped a lot of companies on Long Island with their strategic planning, whether internally with boards, and they're just great, and a dynamic duo, actually. So without any further ado, I will bring them both up. They are handing out something so that you can read about their backgrounds, about who they are, and I'm sure you'll like them as much as I do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really delightful to be here with you this morning on this winter President's Week. We didn't expect quite such a wonderful turnout, but we're happy that you're here. I hope you like this setup. We always think it's very important to give people the opportunity, especially part of a networking organization, to really be able to converse, to talk to each other, to look at each other. And I do understand that not everybody in this room knows each other's names. So I will ask you to introduce yourself, first name only, because Sue and I would like to be able to remember your names. And one of the strategies that we use to remember names, and it's very helpful, is if you take a moment to think about the first letter of your first name, and then use an adjective to describe yourself with that letter. So for instance, my name is Nancy, I'm Nimble Nancy, and I am from the Energeia Partnership and One Purpose Performance. So if you would just take a minute to think about the adjective that best describes you, and we'll go around the room. And let's begin.
So to let you off the hook a little bit, so you have another moment to think. So my first name is Sue, I'm with One Purpose Performance, and I am Sunny Sue, which is kind of nice on a day like yesterday. Could have been snowy, but definitely Sunny Sue.
Sunny Sue.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I thought of, actually, I'm Sophia, so Sunny Sophia.
Okay, and you can say your company name too, so everyone knows.
And I'm from BDO.
Great.
Hi, I'm Anna from Robert Half, and I'm analytical.
That's definitely true. I work at I'm Paula from Robert Half, and I consider myself positive.
That's true also.
My name is Craig, and I'll give you a choice. Take crazy or cautious.
Lucy from Signature Bank, and I'm a good listener.
And your first name? Lucy. Listening Lucy. Okay.
I'm Ron from Nations, and over the past couple of months, my adjective would have to be running from one thing to the next.
Okay.
I'm Leslie, I'm in transition. I was with the New York Stock Exchange, and we'll be seeking.
Seeking.
Yeah.
I'm Mark from Empire Valuation, and I guess moderate.
Moderate Mark. Okay. Moderate
I'm
Mark.
Greg from TD Bank, and I just realized that if I had to choose an initial that starts with G or an adjective, I would say I'm gregarious Greg.
Gregarious Greg. I would have chosen that for you.
Second one.
And you are?
Hi, I'm Peter from Dix Hills Partners. I'm Personal Pete.
Personal Pete.
I'm Lisa, Code Solutions Group, and I'm loquacious. Lisa,
Loquacious
a word
Lisa.
person.
My name is Andrew Crescenzo. I'll say ambitious.
Ambitious.
I'm Neil from English Fenceman. I would say I'm never say die.
Never say die. Okay.
Harvey Feinberg, Generation Wealth Advisors, and I would say happy.
Happy.
Sean McGowan, I'm with Abrams Fenceman. I would say super.
Where's the cake?
I'm Manny. I was formerly with Madison Square Garden. I'm in transition, and I would say multitasking.
Multitasking Manny. Okay.
I'm Alan, I'm from Frequency Electronics. I guess I'm an accountable accountant.
Okay.
I'm Nick from DF King, and I guess I'll say nimble.
Nimble Nick.
Hi, I'm John Canane. I'm also in transition, and I'm a jewel.
Tom Ambry, Tom from Tested Water, and I'm proud to be part of this terrific group.
Terrific Tom.
I'm Vinny DeVito from Vinny DeVito Inc. And I had to have a V for first. Vivacious.
Vivacious Vinny.
So I'm Andrea from Variety Child Learning Center, and I guess I'm proud to be part of this awesome group. I like the
Awesome.
We were trying to get Andrew to say
Tom.
awesome.
She was trying. Great. So we're going to begin today giving you an overview. In a very short time, a lot of information about strategic planning. So we begin with, what is strategic planning? I mean, organizations, we have different companies, different organizations. What is strategic planning? Just throw out some. What comes to mind when you hear strategic plan?
Direction.
Direction. Anybody else? A vision.
Cooperation.
Cooperation.
Priorities.
Priorities.
Long term.
Long term. Long term, short term. Strategic planning. So what is it? And why is it important? Why is it so important to have a strategic plan?
provides direction.
Provides direction. Motivates employees and staff working towards common goals.
Allows for growth in an orderly fashion.
Allows for growth in an orderly fashion.
Measurement.
Excellent.
The best reason to have a strategic plan is because businesses that have a plan perform significantly better than businesses that don't, even if they don't execute that plan. Just going through the planning process and having a plan improves performance.
Exactly. And I don't know about your employees or yourself, but if I thought that every day I worked for the day, this was what I did today, and that was it, that I wasn't part of a bigger picture that was working towards something with more significant outcomes, part of a bigger plan. I mean, it just is also a wonderful opportunity to engage your employees to the next level. People understand that they're not just coming to work today, but they're actually part of a bigger plan that's measurable and result-oriented. So that's great. So why here? Why now? Why are we talking about this? I mean, it was a wonderful opportunity for us to think that a group of successful leaders like yourself said, this is a topic that we would like to engage with today. So why? Why now? Why was this important?
It's important anytime.
It's important anytime. Right. It's important. But the other thing is we can really get caught up in the multi-layer of responsibilities we have. And so to carve out some time to really think about, what does our strategic plan look like? What does it look like? Does it need to be refreshed? I mean, here we are in the dead of winter, the spring is coming. Maybe it's time to really look at what our strategic plan is. Also, do all of our employees know? Are they in alignment? Are they enthusiastic? Do they realize that they're part of a larger goal? So we are going to, as I said, in I guess the next 45 minutes, just review with you the 4 steps that have worked significantly well for Sue and I with various clients and for ourselves. So the 4 steps are, where are we now? What's our strategic direction? Where do we where do we went? Where did we go? Where do we want to be? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? What's the implementation process? What needs to happen? And then most important, especially for CFOs, is how do you monitor and measure your success? I mean, we understand that that's important. You can have a strategic plan, but if it is not something that can be monitored and measured, it's not as useful, obviously, and to keep us on track. So let's start with step number 1. Let's pay attention.
Okay, so this is about where we are now. In order to be able to figure out where we want to go, what we want for our organization or our company, we need to have a clear understanding and assessment of our current situation. So let's think about some of the things that would be involved in assessing that current situation. What's the first one you think about when you think about your organization? What comes to mind first? And you need to know the pulse or actually where we are.
Current financial results.
Current financial position, okay.
Review of the industry you're in.
Review of the industry, okay.
Competitive posture.
Competitive, good.
What needs of your customers do you meet? What problems of theirs do you solve?
Okay, so about customers, about who do we serve? So the first one on the next slide is going to be about our customers. What is the current, and so Neil is cheating because he's looking at the next slide. I'm going to reverse that. He's not cheating, he's using all of his resources.
Exactly.
Excellent.
That's part of that nimble.
Nimble deal. So when we think about our customers, who do we serve? What are their needs? Are we fulfilling their needs? How are we doing in terms of fulfilling their needs? Do we really understand what their issues are, what their concerns are, what their actual status is? What are their perceptions of...
Sorry.
Go back. Okay. What are their perceptions of our performance, our products, and our service? And when we think about that, how do we understand what they're thinking? So what are some ways you know what the customers you're serving are really thinking?
Ask them.
And how do you ask them? How do you do that?
Surveys.
Surveys, okay.
Meet with them.
Meet with them, okay, good. Anything else? Are there any gauges we would use, any dashboard items that we might take a look at?
Well, share of market might come into play.
I'm sorry?
Share of market.
Share of market, okay, good. Referrals, okay. So all of those things are indications that either they're satisfied with us or not. but clearly asking them. And how many of us really take the time to have those conversations with our customers, or do we take for granted right now that they're satisfied with the way we're serving them? So that's an important one. It seems very simple, but clearly an important one. The next one has to do with competitors, and that's, I think Greg mentioned that. How do we compare to our competitors? What are some of the initiatives they're currently involved in, and how did they do? So how do we know what our competitors are doing? How do we understand what others around us are actually doing? How do you see that in your industry? Do you know what your competitors are doing?
It's mostly anecdotal.
Through, okay, TV ads, good.
Through the computer,
Okay.
online, and see what they're offering.
Go online, see what they're offering, very good. I thought about it, Nancy and I were kind of brainstorming, and we said, let's talk about finance and banking. How do we know what other financial institutions are doing? You can look in Newsday, you can look online, you can do mystery shops to understand what they're doing, but we don't necessarily know prior to their doing it, but we can certainly know as it's happening, as it's impacting our customers. And how do we know how successful they've been? Well, we can gauge that also. Is it important to stay ahead of our competitors, or at least know what they're doing? Absolutely. So we can start thinking about what we need to do to be able to be competitive. Next one has to do with industry trends. What changes have there been in the industry? How has technology impacted what we're doing? How will these changes impact our business model, and how can we be prepared to be able to figure out how to move ahead of the market? It might have to do with anything having to do with social media. It might have to do with the way we're selling our products. It might have to do with whether we're using kiosks or whether we're using brick and mortar stand-up locations. So in terms of thinking about the way we pursue the opportunities, it's understanding what are the trends, what will be efficient. Anybody understanding anything in your own business or your own organization where you've seen how this has really had an impact? Anything, Craig, that you've noticed?
You know, I'm in the financial services area. I see, you see ads on TV and you wonder what they are, Colonial Penn. So Colonial Penn, you see what they are, I'm with Access. So, you know, I'm saying, what is that? My wife is saying, what is that? So I'll go into the office and I'll say, did anybody see that commercial? I'll ask some of the top executives, you know, they'll tell me, yeah, they'll sell you insurance, it's good for 2 years. And you may not ever collect on it. So basically, you know, it has its pitfalls, what this Colonial Penn commercial has, but the public doesn't know that, and they really need to get into that situation in order to, but if it ever came up in conversation and I had to pitch against it, at least I'd have the information to know, you better look into the details.
Exactly, so to be able to be an informed expert in terms of guiding, informed advisor.
It seems today, more than ever, it's because of disruptive technology, you sometimes have to step back and say, really, who is my customer? Who is my competitor? You know, because people that you typically, if you get into the world of saying, okay, my competitor is the ones that I see every day, you can become complacent and you read about Boston insurance every day, you read about some other industry or some other company that does not offer its purpose. Taking for granted who your customer is and who your competitors are.
Absolutely, and not knowing what the next thing that's coming is. We take a lot of the technology companies that are struggling now. Take a company like GoPro. I don't know if anybody's watched GoPro, the cameras. All of a sudden they find out that Apple and other organizations are coming in right behind them. So we have to be able to anticipate. Next one has to do with future trends. So what changes are anticipated in the future, and what are we preparing for? How are we constantly thinking ahead? Are we thinking about the next generation's needs? Are we thinking about what the changes are going to be based on the economy, based on weather, based on anything going on around us? How are we preparing for trends coming up? Next one has to do with performance. So are we really looking at the way our products and services are performing? Do we really know what's most lucrative to us? Are we spending the time working on that and focusing on that and creating our sales plans around that? Or are we just letting things happen, and are we letting trends, or are we letting current business move us along? Next one's about recent goals and initiatives. Are we taking the time to measure our success? Are we communicating that information to the rest of the organization? Are we really looking at how we're doing in relation to our plan, and how have we done with most of our initiatives? Do we just get comfortable and move along day-to-day operationally, or are we taking the time to actually plan the work and work the plan and then assess results? To Nancy's comment at the beginning about our team members, about our employees, are we including everyone in the big picture so people know how we're performing and they can feel good about being a part of that? Finally, about our employees, perceptions of our organization and how can we improve it? How do we know how our employees are feeling? How do we know what they're really thinking? Are they coming up with new ideas? Are we creating an environment with employee engagement where we're getting the most out of every employee when they come to work every day? Do we really ask them what they're thinking, what they're hearing, what they're seeing? They're really the eyes and ears and they're the feet on the street. So are we taking advantage of that opportunity? How do we keep them more engaged and accountable in their roles? And accountability is huge. How do we ensure that everybody's coming to work to do a great job every day and we're reinforcing an environment that's creating that? And ultimately, our organizational profile. So identifying our strengths and areas, looking at every aspect of our organization, having to do with service, marketing, succession planning. Are we looking at the big picture and saying we're taking advantage of every aspect of it? And the way to look at this, and many of you have probably done it, is in the form of a SWOT analysis. How many of you have done SWOT analyses? Okay, so just to be able to go to the next slide and take a look at SWOT analysis, it's about our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and threats to an organization. If this isn't something that you're doing on a regular basis with your leadership team, it's a missed opportunity. Because you might have a perspective from a financial gauge, or an operational gauge, or an overall administrative gauge, an overall executive gauge, but there are other people within the organization that might have a different perspective. To not have the opportunity to go through this exercise to understand everyone's perspective at a leadership level, to be able to view the organization, and let's really assess where are we currently. Before we move forward to put together a plan and identify our goals, we really need to understand where we are right now. So any comments about anybody that's done this and how it's worked for you? When you've done a SWOT analysis, what has the experience and the outcome been?
Clear picture.
In a clear picture, okay.
Put it on paper.
Good,
Put
okay.
it to the quadrants. You also can start to develop or move forward.
Okay, very, very good.
You also get a sense very quickly of whether there's, what's the word I'm looking for? Everybody has the same feelings, because there's a lot of debate that goes on in those.
Exactly. Exactly. So when you get a group of people together and they start to identify what they think the opportunities are, and somebody says, I never thought of that, or you see that as a threat, I never thought that that was a weakness or a threat, but then you start to exchange ideas, and in addition to different perceptions, you gain engagement. So you get people to really buy into what's currently happening because they've had a voice in it. So, great perspectives. Anybody else about a SWOT analysis?
A little different perspective in the fact that sometimes anecdotal information seems to come in, and it's sometimes hard to dispute it. Your organizational bias, whether you think your weaknesses are here, but your competitor may think they're totally somewhere else. So the only downside is sometimes that I found is sometimes organizational bias kind of creeps into it. So you can easily go down a wrong path.
So kind of the reflection that you see in the mirror is the one that you want to see, as opposed to what's really there.
Grounded in fact, more anecdotal than factual.
Which is interesting, because I think that's the setting that needs to be created about, let's really look at ourselves the way we are. So it's a culture piece. It's how honest do we really want to be? And as difficult as it may be, what happens with us working with clients a lot is that people don't want to hear what we have to tell them, and then we remind them, that's why you invited us here, to be able to tell you the truth. Sometimes it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear internally, because sometimes people don't understand, well, is somebody vying for position, or is there some history there, or what's the emotion going on, as opposed to let's really factually look at the issue. You gonna say something?
Yeah, I think the representation that you have in putting this together needs to be broad enough in the company. Right? Sometimes companies try to take this on with just a small group.
Yes.
It needs to be representative. Bringing in, either having a department within your company, if you're large enough to have a strategic planning group, but an independent type group to drive it and keep everyone from deviating.
Not just the same administrative team that's always meeting to discuss
Exactly.
it, and you need to bring, because
Right.
they're going to see it the way they see it. So if you bring in staff from different levels,
into that strategic planning, it will open it up if they feel comfortable enough.
Right.
You have to make that staff feel comfortable enough that they can open up in that group.
And then the message to the rest of the organization that it's been at different levels is a very positive message, that people really want to hear what we're thinking.
And from our perspective, it's who we are, but I guess on a corporate level also, you would, on a public level, you bring in the board as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes. Is that what most of the experience has been, bringing in the board? Absolutely. Very good. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I would think, especially in a mid to large size organization, you could do SWOT analysis in different functional areas, and you would think that you're talking about completely different companies. Because each of our perspectives is kind of, you know, we have like tunnel vision in our area of discipline. And I think the challenge on the C-suite level is to have a broad enough perspective to make sure that we're considering everything and filtering out, you
Yes.
know, the haze.
Yes. Thank you, Greg.
Another thing I think that might be helpful is making sure everyone knows that they have equal voice.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
because if you have a mixed group of leaders and other folks in the organization, they may feel like what they have to say isn't of value, and you lose the front line.
Absolutely.
That way.
So it's establishing kind of house rules as you begin the process to talk about everybody leaves their title at the door. Great point. Thank you.
Do you actually recommend that different groups do their own SWOT analysis and bring it to this management team?
Has that been your
I mean,
experience?
is that what you recommend? Have you seen people do that, where you take different functions around the business and different operations and have them do their own SWOT?
Different parts of an organization can do that as their own developmental tool. So we've definitely seen that working.
Well, there was one thing, I was at the Garden for many years, and they did all this strategy and SWOT analysis at the very high level. As assistant controller there, one of the things that I identified right away was putting into play a lot of the strategies that they wanted to do, and the communication wasn't really there. So we used to gather as a group within entertainment, the media would do the same in facilities, and then at some point the assistant controllers would all meet and kind of talk about how do we make this all work for the three of us. Because what was great for media wasn't always great for someone else. And it worked out great. I mean, we did a lot of business assessment and operational analysis that made things more efficient, and it drives costs down, which helps. We were talking earlier about just driving costs down. But what helps driving costs down is no matter what direction the sales team takes, your costs are as efficient as they can be, at least at one point in time.
And it also allows, I think, in terms of opportunities for growth and development for individuals in the organization to know more about what's going on in different areas.
Yeah, this communication is the biggest thing.
And a big piece of this, and we'll get into it a little bit later, is about how do you communicate all of this to the rest of the organization. So this information happening is a wonderful thing and shouldn't stay with whatever team just put it together. It has to be communicated out through the organization. So the next piece.
So you really make a very good point, and I just want to reinforce how important it is that research has shown time and time again that employees who are engaged and feel that their input has been important to the company's direction and strategic plan. I mean, you cannot measure the value of an employee who feels that they're part of working the strategic plan, they're part of the voice and the direction that the leaders, the top leaders are, employing. So the other thing is, a diversity of talent and skill is very important in creating that strategic plan and looking at the SWOT analysis. Again, chasing the experts is no longer what people are doing. In fact, when you bring together groups of diverse people with different backgrounds, education, and skill sets, you problem solve with more accuracy. So although many times corporations, organizations feel this process is taking so long, it would be so much easier for us to sit around a boardroom table and have us make this plan and decisions and let everyone know what it is. But in fact, again, if you problem solve with more accuracy by taking the time to have the process of including everyone and getting their buy-in, you create stakeholders, and in the end, it certainly will be worth your time. So one of the things when we look at the situation assessment, really looking at where we are now and understanding future trends and taking into consideration everything that you need to achieve, we need to really make sure, is your vision statement out there? You have to consider, your vision and your mission statement. Now, a vision statement is obviously something that's more aspirational and something that is less tangible, but it's as important. No,
But to be the best, to basically be the best quality company and deliver what our products want.
Right. Yeah, actually, we did. We looked up your mission statement yesterday, and it was all over every page of your website. Good job. Yeah. Anybody else want to share that, you know, you have a mission statement, you just don't know it? It's very common, by the way.
We have a mission and a vision statement, and we put it on everything. And we hand it out on the beginning of every year to all the staff. But I could probably tell you that there's probably a handful of staff that probably even know we have a mission and a vision statement, and even though we put it on everything we hand it out, I would wonder how many could really answer that question.
Right. So sometimes it's a small way that you could begin to engage employees in a different level of thinking and being part of an organization. So if at the next staff meeting, you know, you have it posted and just refer to the things that we do on a daily basis that really help. Exactly. So, you know, it helps employees and even ourselves, again, realize that we're part of, you know, a bigger picture here. So the vision statement, actually, you know, obviously our goals are all driven around our mission statement, and having goals, obviously, is really important. So do you personally set goals for yourself on a monthly basis, your staff? How important are having goals for you all personally in your company, and then of course for the people that work for you? Talk a little bit about the goals that you set for yourself or your company.
It's critical.
Critical.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the habit for a long time of setting 3-year goals, 1-year goals, and then, you know, each week when I set my schedule, I always set my schedule with an eye towards the goal, because otherwise you get sucked into the day-to-day stuff, and your goals get crowded out. The things you wanted to get accomplished get crowded out, so they have to be in writing and, you know, specific and so.
Right. Anyone else want to talk about your goals? Company, do you feel, yes?
The most relevant organization I ever worked for, the most efficient one, actually had organizational goals tied to performance goals for every staff member. So they had, every staff member had line of sight on organizational goals, both as a team and as an individual. Ridiculously high-performing work.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't easy or fun, but it was good work.
Where was it?
Believe it or not, this was Nashville government. This was government.
Wow.
This was Nouveau Bureau, not typical bureaucracy.
What
By
bureau?
any stretch.
Oh, Nouveau.
Yes.
Oh, that's a nice term.
Yeah, it was.
Nouveau
It was a
Bureau.
great team. It was a great team. We actually used Hewlett-Packard as our, you know, model at the time. So,
Excellent.
yeah, but that's what it looks like, right? The organization has goals. Every staff member uses those goals to meet their own performance. Everybody's got line of sight on what they accomplished, so that they know that they're all doing excellent work together,
Right.
tied to each
And-
other.
Exactly. So the objectives to meet the goals, and this gets back again to the measurability piece. We like to use an acronym called SMART. So they're specific, they're measurable, they're action-oriented, they're realistic, that's key, because you're not realistic and time-bound. So this way you could really look at your goals, have the objectives to meet those goals, and really be able to look at the accountability piece. What are the roles and responsibilities? Who's doing what? And do you really have the resources? Do you have the resources to meet the goals? And so this is all very important, the vision, the mission, your goals, and your objectives. So again, we all have high-level responsibilities, and it's really difficult to carve the time out of what you do on a daily basis to think about these things. So we really appreciate that we have this time to help you really follow through on some of these thoughts and really determine, you know, what you can take away from here that will be helpful.
So the next piece has to do with how we're going to get there. What is our roadmap to achieving results and outcomes? So currently we've kind of set the stage where you know where we want to go. We've done a good job in putting together our vision, our mission, our values, and putting together, make sure that everybody understands them. Now, how are we going to figure out what the pieces are to be able to get there. So what we look at is, what we're looking at is what are the challenges we need to overcome in order to be able to get there? In other words, what are the barriers that are holding us back from reaching our vision? So this might be an established idea that has been in place before, or we might be reestablishing it. In other words, we might have a roadmap in place, but we have to consider what are the things that have been holding us back all along to be able to be successful. And what are some of those things that you identify now that are holding you back from reaching your aspiration goals or your vision?
We've never done that.
You've never done?
We've never done that here.
We've never done that here. Okay, so we're comfortable with the way things used to be, and when somebody introduces change, there's a lot of resistance. Is resistance normal? Is it typical? Is it something to be anticipated?
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. Okay, so change and resistance is absolutely to be expected. If we introduce something new, whether it's a product, a service, or whatever it is, culture change, we're going to get resistance. But as leaders, our role is to be able to anticipate it and to be able to manage it. So people are afraid of the unknown, so it's our responsibility to understand their concerns and help them through it, to give them the skills and tools and resources to be able to be successful. So that's a big one. We've always done it this way. What are some of the other barriers that are in place?
Sometimes you have cash constraints.
Absolutely. Okay. So resources, cash constraints. We have big ideas, but not big funding. It's a possibility. So that has to do with, it could be resources, it could be tools, it could be technology that's impacted. So we might have the best idea, but no ability to be able to source it. How about people? Could that be a challenge? I'm sorry.
I'd say time constraints.
Time constraints,
Right,
absolutely.
some priorities, and there's a lot of things we want to do, but you can only do X number of things, X hours in a day.
And the prioritizing is very difficult. So if we're not all on the same page as a leadership team, understanding what priorities are most important, it's easy to get off track or to be in a siloed environment where we're doing our own thing, not so conscious about what's going on in other areas. So those are some of the barriers that need to be addressed as we're moving forward. The next one has to do with understanding the critical success factors. So what are the critical success factors that are going to allow us to achieve the goals that we're setting in place? What are the things that we're going to put in place to make sure that we can overcome the barriers to be successful? Well, typically, no fewer than 2 and no more than 7 would be helpful in order for us to be able to put together a solid strategic plan that we can have success in. And the last one has to do with the combination of the strategies that are taken to drive the achievement by controlling the success factors and overcoming the barriers. So we need to be able to look at both at the same time. And those are really the 3 factors that are going to help us create our roadmap. So we create our roadmap, we communicate it, we make sure it's in place, and the final piece of the strategic planning process is how are we going to monitor progress? And that's what it sounds like, Vinny, you do on a weekly basis. So in looking at a strategic plan, many people go through the strategic planning process, put together a great document, circulate it, keep it on the shelf, and then wait until next year, or wait until the board or someone else brings up and says, so how are we doing in our strategic plan? Well, our belief is that we need to be really clear about the implementation piece, the measurement, and the communication of results on a regular, ongoing basis. So we talk about priorities, and we talk about what do we need to do from a prioritization basis so we don't get caught up in the day-to-day. It has to do with every 3 months. Our belief is that every 3 months to be able to monitor would be realistic and effective. If not, we get so caught up in the day-to-day, we have this plan in place, but we're not acting on it on a regular basis. So the review would be to look at our strategies and to say, how are we doing in our performance against the objectives that we set? And if the objectives are clearly communicated, and to your point, if they're related to performance, and every employee is completely in line with that, so you have complete alignment from a mission perspective to activities on a day-to-day basis, you're really driving to success. And ultimately, that monitoring is going to make sure that we stay front and center with the day-to-day operation and our strategy. So what it does is it really allows us to be able to say in this 4-step process, we're understanding where we are, we're understanding where we want to be, What are the areas that are potentially holding us back or that can propel us forward? And then how are we going to measure them? So it's a simple enough process for everyone organizationally to understand it, and as leaders in an organization, for us to be able to own it and drive it. So any questions about the four-step process or any components, or is there anything that you've used that we have left out that you would like to add to that? Anything else that you've identified in your careers?
You know,
Yes, please.
one of the things that I've been driving in, I've been at this company now for about a year and a half, and the alignment of this strategy and strategic plan, the financial people in this room, to the operating budgets, and the spending and the decisions that we make, right? When this matures, it becomes actually easier to make those decisions. If you align everything that you, all the decisions you make, or the main decisions that you make, the budgets that you establish, if you align them to the strategic plan, it does help flush out, well, why are we doing this?
Yes.
It's not contributing to where we want to be. So it's not, there must be another reason why we're doing it. And if there isn't, it actually acts as a vehicle to flush those conversations, have those conversations, and reprioritize.
Absolutely. So it acts as a filter, to be able to say, before we make decisions, does it align with what we've agreed upon in terms of our direction? And, and if not, how do we need to tweak our plan, which is another piece. So
Or
the plan-
tweak our spending.
But to be able to say the strategic plan is not in stone. So if something critical happens, I mean, thinking back, God forbid, 9/11 happened. Did that change all of our planning, all of our actions? Absolutely. So we need to be able to anticipate what we have control over and then manage what we don't when we gain further information. That's a great point in terms of the operating budget. Thank you.
There's also a chicken and egg thing that you alluded to. So in a mature organization, what you do is you look at your prior performance to budget and strategic plan to build your new one, your new direction in the next year if it changes or if it needs to be flexible. And then to make those new budgets now conform to that plan is very important. But that communication between the operating departments, the finance, and senior management is critical because they really have to understand how the direction of the company is going and where the budgets are fitting into that and where the last performance did. If you don't have that information, you really just set a plan that no one's going to achieve year after year after year.
Yes, and there's a real disconnect then, and we're not seeing the entire organization as a team. And how often do you have different departments get the memo from finance saying you need to cut your budget by 15%, 10%, 20%, and the reaction from the operating departments is they don't understand what we're doing. They don't understand our priorities. And then there's a real disconnect between the them and the us, and you are the team. So how do we ensure that everybody's making decisions toward the same final goal?
Yeah, the harder thing is to do when you get everyone to buy in, or they say they buy in, and they really don't. And then you have to flesh that out so you can find out what is it about your direction that you're not getting. What haven't you communicated to senior management because your budget says this and the direction's going this way.
Well, the other thing too, I think, is if you have a culture of team in an organization, then you could have a finance person on a program review committee, right? So you're looking at program performance and the finance person can see, okay, is this a lost leader or not? Is this something that we're willing to let go of a little bit because it's going to bring us more in the long run as opposed to just, we're not just the story is flushing money out the door, for no end. I think it can really help with the disconnect between finance and programmatic, talking to each other.
Absolutely. And this really starts conversation, and that's what it's all about. What do we have in common? We're driving an organization to success. So we all have different components and talents and skills and expertise to be able to do that. Let's really hear each other's perspective.
I don't think you can do a good strategic plan at any level in a business unless you combine the program side with whatever you want to call that side with the finance side. Both sides have to understand each other. So I could never do what I do here if I didn't understand what the program side's needs are or what they have to do. I could never flush those two together if you don't really have a true understanding. You can't do either one of them in a vacuum.
So it's it's understanding and valuing and respecting. And I think those pieces only come about when you can have these conversations. Thank you.
Any other takeaways from this very broad brush about a really important, did you resonate with any specific part of the presentation, whether it be assessing your situation where you are now, really knowing the direction you're going into, the implementation, the measurability, anything that really resonated with you that you are going to want to take some time to delve into or talk to some of your colleagues about? Any other takeaways?
Yeah, actually, I thought one good takeaway was a reminder that inclusivity is important, and that you want to, either you've got a board of directors or a management group at a firm, you still want to make people feel like they got input and solicit their opinions and take them seriously. Like if people want to feel like they're important, and that's actually a good reminder.
Good, I'm glad.
I think one of the things we may not have talked about more deeply was as financial people in the roles we are in, it's really to also monitor the perception, right? So people think the message is one way, they think they're doing what they're supposed to do, and then they get a bad message somewhere along the line. You have to monitor that misperception so that you can say, no, this is the right direction. Have that conversation. Don't, like we said earlier, don't just amend your strategic plan, you amend the thinking about how they fit into that strategic plan.
Very good point. Anybody else? Yeah?
I think all of this presupposes that there's culture and leadership in place that allows this to happen.
That's right.
Not only
That's a key, encouraging.
Encourages it, right.
Encouraging.
This is a good point.
Because without their support, it's not gonna happen, and they have to walk the walk and talk the talk. So you can't have, an EVP make one decision, which is counter to the plan, and then have the CEO approve it. And then everybody else is just sitting there saying, okay, well, let's throw this out the window. Because that's the meaning that's gonna come.
That's what's happening in our government.
Any other comments with regard to this? Yeah?
Yeah, I think the real leap is for the individual to be given goals by management, but yet to develop his or her own strategic plan in order to achieve those goals. So yours may look different than mine, even though we're in the same job, because you're a different person with different strengths and opportunities. And I think that's the real leap in order to for management to leverage the importance of strategic planning and goals.
To that point, I worked for Lomas years ago, and one of the things they did is every employee, back then it was popular, was Franklin Covey.
Oh, yeah, the Franklin planners.
And they sent everyone, whether you were a clerk or a senior executive, you went to the Franklin Covey training because they wanted everyone to at least manage their day, manage their week, manage their lives, so that you understood management of time and communication.
I think that goes under the heading of ownership.
Yeah.
Right, good point.
If management pushes it down, as opposed to the employee or staff pushing it up, then the ownership is what's going to drive it. And give people the ability to own it, then they're going to want to perform at a different level than if they're being told what to do. It could be the same thing, it's just a question of how you get it out of the system.
Exactly. The end result is the same. It's just how you go about motivating, encouraging, and holding accountable. Yeah? So anybody else want to share anything that, as we were going through this four-step process, anything that you feel there's resistance to in your company or organization? I mean, you can become all motivated about refreshing the current strategic plan you have in place, or, first of all, we have about 7 minutes left. And one of the things we really wanted to encourage you to do right now is to take some time before you go back to the office and, pen in hand, turn the sheet over and write down a few action items for yourself. what do you want to do with this information? Even if it's for you in your own department or leadership for the entire organization, you know, really a call to action. Take a moment now to really write down some action step that we want you to be able to take something away from today's session and actually implement into, you know, the work that you do. So just take a moment, yes.
Can I just turn the table? One of the things in this whole process that kind of keeps me up sometimes is, if I put my board hat on, is the whole risk management piece. And, you know, that whole idea of, you know, what aren't we seeing? What risks are we not? You know, what have you guys seen in terms of how best practices play out in terms of how companies are identifying those, whether it's the black swans or the, you know, the things that nobody wants to talk about, or the things that people aren't thinking about? I mean, what do you see as a best practice?
Typically, it takes having the courageous conversations about saying what are the real issues that we're not addressing and making that part of the culture. So it's on a regular basis having the team work together to say, let's really look at the SWOT analysis and let's take a look at it and really look at what our weaknesses and threats are. And using those tools to be able to do it, and then having very direct conversations with whether it's board members or executives that are not on board, to be able to ensure accountability and drive outcome there. I'm curious about anybody else's heart.
Along with that, you know, when I had my marketing company years ago, I had about 8 salespeople, and I found humor was one of the best ways of bringing issues to the table. And we used to have, I used to call it a problem-solving session, where it was really solution seeking, but everybody seems to focus on the problem and not sometimes enough on the solution. And before we would start, everybody would get around the table, and before we'd get into, you know, the problem would be there, but before we get into the serious stuff, everybody had to throw out something really stupid. I mean, stupid enough to make everybody fall off the chairs in laughter. And you'll be surprised that, you know, like I'm sure there are people sitting in this room that have something to say and, or perhaps holding it back or whatever. But in that environment, everybody's just throwing it out there and writing it down on the wall. This was so long ago, we used to have to use tape to tape the, but as it progressed, you know, and we looked at the stupid solutions and you drilled down, a lot of those solutions were, you know, when you refined them, the actual solution. And oftentimes they came from the person who probably would never have said anything in the beginning. So it's an
interesting technique.
Yeah,
an interesting culture piece also. The other piece is what Greg mentioned before about we've always done it this way. So let's get a group together to commit to what are the things that we've always done this way that need to be exploded? What are the things that we need to be able to look and say, what's historical that's not helpful anymore?
Well, you always have to work on those people that, although they don't like it the way it's being done because it's been done that way all along, they're also afraid to admit that, well, but why, but they're afraid to change it because they're afraid what's going to be on the other side. So you know, you have a lot of that in our environment. We have a lot of that.
Resistance to
Trying to
change.
encourage those people to participate in the discussions and have an understanding of just because it's done this way doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. We weren't happy anyway. It's done anyway, but people are resistant.
Right.
So opening that up, and that's part of what you said. How do you get those people to open up?
And part of it is the fear factor that you mentioned. It's to understand what people are really afraid of. And once you can create an environment where people are willing to talk about that, that's when you can start to be able to truly move forward.
To Vinny's point, they mentioned, one thing that I'd like an answer from you guys if you can is, I find that the hardest part is to convince all parties involved that it's worth the time. Sit down, we don't have enough time, right? But how do you carve out the time to sit down and work on this as a team to move that communication forward? Because if you don't do it, you'll never move You just be talking about it amongst yourselves.
That's a great point, and I
So
think-
what have you found in solutions that people say, well, we've carved out this amount of time, we've done something?
I think Neil hit it on the head, that it's about business results. Right? I mean, that it's proven that if you have a strategic plan, it will accelerate your business. So that's the fact. And then it's a matter of figuring out what we're currently spending time on that might not be producing outcome, and to make a commitment to dedicate a certain period of time. And once this is done, once the process starts, and it could be an off-site half-day to begin, then another day, and once you put the plan together, it's once every 3 months. It's evaluating, assessing, measuring what your dashboard or metrics are to be able to make sure you're on track, which is good business anyway. So it's not more time or more work, it's just doing work in a different way. But the concept of roadmap, as simple as it is, you never know where you're going if you don't have a map or a plan. So it's really having that initial conversation first and getting the entire leadership team on board to say this is a commitment we're making toward our future. So I hope
And
that answers.
once people really do engage in that first meeting, that first offsite, not only did they feel personally recharged because it's an investment in the company, or they can feel that way, that the company is investing in them and leadership development and including them into the bigger picture and the strategic plan and the outcome and success of the company. So once you dig your heels in and the leadership team agrees that this is something that's worthwhile, the employees and everybody will realize the benefits early on in the process. So anybody else want to share or think about or share some of the barriers that might exist for you to, in all your enthusiasm, go back and say, we need to?
Well, there's something, I went back to the sheets and started reading it a little bit in your presentation here, and you talk about current and future. And I think that all of us have come across people, and you talk about resistance, and we talk about past performance in your piece here that you're looking at. And we're talking about the past. When you talk about the past, you talk about from a personal point of view, a business point of view. I think that the past is very important because that's the thinking that individuals are going to come to the table with. And with that thinking process, you could have all the great ideas, you could have the greatest product, but if that person had a very bad experience 30 years ago, like lost all his money with Bank Hapoalim or Bank Leumi in Israel, and then you're trying to sell that person an insurance policy today or an investment today, you're not going to get anywhere with that person. That person is so, no matter how you try to adjust that person or move them forward, it's not going to happen because the person lost all of his money and had to start new. So from that perspective, you need to always address the past. And you may not find out the past. It may take you 7 meetings with that person to find out the past, or you may find it out from his son. So these are all the ways and tactics to know what you're dealing with. Now to bring that to the table here with marketing and what you want to do, you need to collect that data and know how you're going to address it. That's I feel a very important issue. And that's not, I'm giving you one example. I come across these examples quite often.
Yes.
The other thing that we just wanted to mention.
We wanted to close.
We believe this is the language that executives speak, right? You got to trust and all others bring data, that what you deal with day to day is you deal with data, you deal with facts, you deal with reality. So although it might seem like strategic planning is something soft, it's really not. It's about creating success and creating stability and a future for all of the organizations that you represent. So
thank you.
Thank you for your
Very
time.
much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thanks, Sue and Nancy. Well, thanks everybody for coming. We had quite a good turnout. I think it's a very good event. Hopefully we took some things away. We're going to check everybody's notes to see what we let's not forget our next couple of events. In April, we have the Education Night at Fox Hollow. March 10th is the next FEI roundtable or CFO roundtable. And next Tuesday at BDO, we have the proxy update.
What's the date in April for Fox Hollow?
Excuse me?
The date?
That's April 22nd, Wednesday, April 22nd.
What time is it?
5:30, 6 o'clock, we'll send out emails.
Okay.
If you're not on our email mailing list, give Dominique your card and we'll make sure that you are.
Okay, thank you.
We got a question.
So everyone in the room, that the April 22nd meeting, it's real.